Mealtimes can often prove to be a challenging part of family life, especially if you have neurodivergent children who are picky eaters. In today's episode of the Real Talk with Ree podcast, we are diving into how mealtime routines can help your family just make life a little bit easier. This is part of a bit of a series I'm doing all about routine. And to support your routine, I have put together Ree's routine resources, which are a whole load of printables that you can grab inside of my Organised Life Club. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But for now, hello, welcome. My name is Rhiannon Morgan. Everyone calls me Ree. Welcome to the podcast. Let me know down in the comments if your family is one of the many families across the country that struggles with routine at meal times, with picky eating. Hopefully some of the things I'm going to share in this episode will help to make the whole process a little bit less stressful. So having a mealtime routine can be especially helpful if you have neurodivergent children or if, like me, you have ADHD. So we touched on this briefly in previous episodes. Routine for me as someone with ADHD just helps me automate things. It's like paying a bill on direct debit. It just makes it so much easier than if I just have to reinvent the wheel every single time. So for me, that's why it works. It just helps to take something else out of my very cluttered, foggy brain. Now, for children with autism, having a routine can just make them feel safe, secure. Children with autism, in my experience, and I have 4 of them, like predictability. So by setting up a mealtime routine that is predictable, will allow you to create this safe space for them to eat. And then when that is in place, you can take little tiny baby steps towards encouraging perhaps a wider range of foods. Now, chances are, even if you don't have a routine, you probably have an accidental routine that you've slipped into anyway. And the routine that I am going to talk about today is something that you can edge towards. And as I've said in previous episodes, if you are looking at implementing routine with your family, specifically if you have children with autism, I would not suggest in any way, shape or form ever trying to change everything at once. I would take small baby steps, little incremental changes over towards a new routine, which in the long run, your children will thrive on. But ultimately, if you make too many changes to what they're currently doing, which by accident or not is their current routine, straight away, then you're going to be met with a lot of resistance, upset, and meltdown. So just keep that in mind. So one thing I would start with, if we're looking at routine in total in your whole lives, starting with mealtime routine is a really good place to start. And this kind of goes back almost to when my children were babies. When everything went a bit off, it went a bit squiffy. If their sleep was off, I used to think, before we fix their sleep, let's fix when they're eating. And if you can get their food and their meal times on track, you can then move on to bedtime, which we will discuss in a future episode. But ultimately, children generally, specifically children with autism, are going to find it so much easier if your mealtime routines are predictable. And while I understand this is not going to be possible for every single family, if you've got one of those families where your children do so many extracurricular activities or you work shifts or whatever it might be, it's if you can work it so that your children are eating at the same times every day in the same places, then your life is going to be that much easier. So if you are eating at the same times, your body naturally expects food at that time. You start to get hungry at those times. I remember when my babies were very small, I got into a really bad habit of eating a Kit Kat during one of the feeds. And my body started getting hungry in the middle of the night when there is absolutely no need to be hungry at that time of the night. And my body started to expect food, and then I'd feel hungry and want to eat another Kit Kat. Taking all of the other elements out of it, just if our children are eating at certain times, they are more likely to want to eat at those times and to be open to eating and just eat more on their plates and for it to feel like it's worthwhile feeding them a meal if you can stick to those times. If they're in school, some of these times may be quite naturally imposed. They will naturally have lunch at the same time every day, perhaps an earlier or later slot, but within an hour slot each day. If you know what time they've got to get to school, then breakfast can quite naturally fall at the same time each day. And pick a time where you can allow plenty of time. This is wherever possible for both breakfast, lunch if they're home from school, and then dinner. And then your evening meal. Obviously, this is going to be really difficult if you are, say, working shifts or you're not always there. You've got different activities each evening. But if wherever possible, you can get your children eating dinner at a set time that is not too close to their bedtime, so they've got a bit of time to decompress and do a wind down bedtime routine, digest some of their food before they actually go to bed and go to sleep, then that's perfect. For us, then, my children tend to eat at 5 to about 5:30. That would be our set dinner time. Generally, it's 5 o'clock, less a few other things are going on. And I'm lucky in that I work from home, so obviously I'm able to eat with them. My husband is usually home for dinner, so he doesn't have an office job. He works in building, so his work tends to be earlier in the day and then finishing earlier. So we are very lucky in that we are generally all able to eat together at that time. But this isn't something that always happened. My children's eating and their eating times and their meal times have always been quite structured because I found that this always suited them better. I always found that they slept better when they ate at set times. I didn't necessarily know when they were all babies that they were neurodivergent, but I just knew that they did better on eating at set times and sleeping at set times, and routine helped them to thrive and help them to feel happier. So from very young, the other thing, of course, it's very easy for me to know when to feed them and to sort out each of their routines. Having 4 children, you've got a lot to juggle. So the children always had this very set routine. My husband only really during COVID, we were all stuck at home, joined in with the family meal times and things. He was very much eating on his own schedule up until that point. But no, since COVID, since that lockdown, then we do all eat together. And if this is something you can manage wherever possible, I'd highly recommend it because it's a good opportunity to sit together, to talk to your children at twice a day, potentially, if you're sitting together to have breakfast, then again at dinner, and also to model some eating behaviours, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, it's just a really nice opportunity to sit together with your children. We're just going to talk about our evening routine because I think I'll talk about breakfast in with the morning routine. But our evening meal routine looks something like this. This is where we've worked towards, it's what works for us, and hopefully some of this will work for your family too. Going way back to the weekends and meal planning. Now I will do a whole separate episode on weekend routines and what I do for planning for the week and things. But one of the things I do in my weekend reset is meal plan. Now the children really like this. I like it because I'm throwing away less food. I didn't used to meal plan. I used to buy stuff and then something would be used, be thrown out. It's just such a waste of money, resources. It's infuriating. Or you just get to the afternoon and be like, oh, what are we going to eat? And it's a feeling of doom when you're just like, oh my God, I've got to think of what to feed my family again. Whereas if you just do that once a week, you're like, okay, this is who everyone's going to be home certain days. There are certain days where we cannot all eat together because the children are just, like ships passing in the night because Bella's got an apple and Zara's got dancing, and it's just all the different places and we don't actually get to sit together. But the majority of the time we do get to sit together, and we plan all this out on a meal plan on the weekend, and then that actually goes up on a board in the kitchen. So the children already know what to expect. Like I said, they like the predictability. So the children know ahead of time which meals they're going to expect. And this seems to just do really well with them. They seem to be able to look forward to certain meals, and they're just a lot happier. When I haven't put things up on the board, they don't like it because they don't know what's coming. And my children like predictability. You can take this one step further and perhaps get the children to help you pick what you're going to have for certain meals. You can get them to write it on a board. I have got a whole set of printables for an organisation station, which includes a meal plan. I will link all of that below, how you can put together your own organisation station. But yeah, definitely get your children involved in what they want for food during the week. Get them involved in the meal planning, and if they can write it on the board, it's in their handwriting. If they're of an age, they can do that. Just getting them involved in the routine really does help with them enjoying the experience and ultimately eating more, which I think as parents, especially as a mum who one of my children went through query failure to thrive when he was very small, and he went a bit off breastfeeding. I got really obsessed with it, trying to increase his weight. I was really stressed. And if you've ever been through that, where you've had a medical professional raise concerns about how much your children are weighing and whether they're developing enough, whether they're eating enough, there is this heightened sense of stress that goes with that. So if you have got children who are very resistant to certain foods and you're worried, I get that. And the more that you can involve them in the process, the more you can work towards a food routine that works for everybody, the better it's going to be. So you've got your meal plan. And then what we do each day is, like I said, it's generally 5 o'clock dinner time. So the children come home from school, and my eldest son that is still at home full time. So our very eldest is in university, but Will is the eldest of the three who's at home in school. He generally has a bit of homework to do. The girls generally only have homework on the weekends, so the girls will play. But then when it's time to get ready for dinner and lay the table, we get the children involved in laying the table. And we've done this from a very young age, and it's very basic. It's just putting out cutlery, putting out glasses, and then we also have a jug in the fridge of no added sugar, orange squash. It's all nice and chilled to make sure that they're hydrating along with their meals. Other than the squash they have at the table, I think they have juice generally with breakfast at the table, and then they have squash at the table. Other than that, they just drink water the rest of the day, but they do have squash at the table with their meals. So we lay the table, and this is like everyone do this together kind of thing, and it's just preparing for dinner. So sometimes it'll be like, okay, let's lay the table, and then you can go and finish up what you were doing. And there's this sort of transition period, because I know a lot of children with autism can have slight difficulties with transitions. It's okay, I'm going to get everyone to lay the table, and you've got a little bit more time now to just finish up what you were doing, tidy up. And my children really respond well to that little transition time where they can finish something up. They really don't like swift transitions where they don't know what's coming. So I like to give them countdowns, like this long till dinner, this long till dinner, so they know that it's coming, because otherwise it seems to be a shock every single night if you don't give them these warnings. You expect them to come to the table and eat. So then we all come to the table and eat. There are no devices at all at the table. I think this is really important. We don't have a TV in the dining room at all. And if your children are currently eating in front of the television, if this is something at all you can wean away from, then I'd highly recommend doing it, because ultimately what we want to teach our children is to move towards more intuitive eating. And if we're zoned out and watching the television, then we're not focusing on what am I eating, is it nourishing my body, and when am I full. There's so much emphasis that I'm trying to put with my children on teaching them to listen to their bodies, because I think as someone that grew up born in the 80s, raised in the 90s, teen in the noughties kind of thing, I think we were not very good at intuitive eating. We had very mixed messaging about being super skinny like all the models in the magazines, but also clear your plate, and if sad, put food on top of that. So we're trying to move away from this very mixed messaging that I grew up with and move more towards what I call listening to our tummies to my children, and trying to actually listen to the cues in our bodies that our bodies give us to say, I'm hungry, I'm genuinely hungry, I need food for fuel, and hey, I'm getting quite full now, so that we're not under eating and therefore being hungry in no time at all or feeling starved of energy, but we're also not overeating and feeling that awful, like stuffed, gross feeling that I think we've all felt at some point that just feels really unpleasant. And I think if we are watching the TV or not paying attention to what we're eating, then it can be really easy to those cues. So if we're going to teach our children to be good intuitive eaters so that they can eat healthily and ultimately eat when they're hungry, stop when they're full, if we can teach them to listen to those cues, we're going to need for them to be able to hear those cues. So if we can move away from having any form of devices or TV, then that is the ideal. If your children are currently having some sort of TV entertainment running during meal times, then this is something perhaps you could wean. So maybe rather than going cold turkey and just going, we're moving from eating in the living room to eating in the dining room and we're not having any TV, we could just like, okay, maybe I would start. So say, for example, if they're currently eating in the living room in front of the TV, I'd maybe start by just turning it down a lot. still let them watch it and just turn it down. And then maybe if your children are children that have a meal and dessert, that they can just watch it during their main meal and then not have it when they're dessert. And then maybe they just have it for a few minutes and then they have it off the rest of their meal. And then eventually they're literally just having it for the first minute of their meal and then they're not watching at all. And then eventually it's just not going on. And just taking those baby steps, you're going to face a lot less resistance than if you're just like, whoop, big change. And then making the eating at the table, because I do feel that eating at a table with my children really does help them, because it gives them an opportunity to sit and talk and chat about their days. But it's also teaching them how to behave when we go out to restaurants or when they're older and they go to restaurants with their friends. It's teaching them the table manners and the basics of just eating in company that they'll need as they get older. So ideally, we're at the table, there's no devices. What we always have on the table is the cutlery, drinks. Like I said, we have a jug of squash and then drinks. We also have wipes at the table. We did used to use cheeky wipes. I used to use cloth wipes years ago. And cheeky wipes are basically very small flannels. And I used them for like hands and faces and things. I use them when the kids have cloth nappies. And they're just so handy. They're like, have you ever had a warm towel in some like certain restaurants bring you like a warm wet towel? It's like that. It's really nice. So rather than using actual wet wipes, because my kids still get quite mucky when they're eating certain food, we just still use those because I already had them and we do still use those. So that's by no means an important part of everyone's routine, but since we have those to hand, we find them kind of helpful. We're all sitting down at the table. The food, which the children already knew what it was going to be, comes over. I generally put, with most meals, obviously if it's like a gravy-based meal or something, it's not going to work. Initially, I used to put it in a bowl in the centre of the table. Now I can just put it straight on the children's plates because they got better at accepting more things. But initially, when they were much fussier, what I used to do was put stuff in the middle of the table that I wanted them to eat. And I'd give them the food that they were happy eating. And then there'd be salad in the middle of the table. And then we'd all take it. And they would watch us take it. And they'd be like, oh, okay. And there'd be no obligation or no even asking if they wanted to try some. And often, if you were eating something and you're like, oh, wow, this is delicious. Although I am going to talking about food at the table again in a second. But if you're like, and you're just not necessarily going on about it, but just clearly enjoying your food, and then you're like adding a bit of salad and things, it is more likely that your child will want to try something that is either on your plate or is in the middle of the table if they're just seeing you genuinely enjoy it, than if you put it on their plate and you're like, go on, eat that, try that. My dad used to do that to me, it drove me out. So try it with me. Go on, you might like it. Don't do that. Do not do that. It will not. Badgering your children won't help. You're far more likely to get them to want to try something if it's eased in gently. So if you're enjoying meals, even if you're not eating the same meals initially as them, then they're more likely to want to try things. The other thing you can try is then very slowly integrating it so that you're ultimately moving towards eating the same food. Many years ago, I used to have to make multiple meals because my husband would eat the same as kids and the kids would eat the same as each other. And I was just like, I don't care what I eat because I can't make a different meal. I'll just eat something. I was the only one that was just generally not caring. But ultimately, nobody ate the same food as each other and it was exhausting. We have now moved towards most members of the family will eat the same meal with slight variations for some meals, which is way more manageable than it used to be. So this can look like maybe you're doing a certain meal, but a plainer version initially for the children, or a pared down version, or not with all the extras. And a really good way to get children to agree to move towards being more open to food is, again, the very gradual process. So initially, you want them to try something. You just eat it and enjoy it in front of them. Okay, just eat it and enjoy it in front of them. And then they may get curious about it. The next stage from there would be, I don't want you to try it. I just want you to have it near your plate. Like a plate of something or an item, a small, let's call it a carrot. Say your child doesn't eat carrots. I just want you to consent to having a carrot on a side plate next to your plate. You don't have to eat it. You don't have to touch it. You can touch it if you want to. You can check it out. But I just want you to agree to have it near you. Then maybe a future meal. The carrot is on the edge of their plate. It's not touching the rest of their food. Don't start going with the touching the food yet. They don't have to consent to trying it. They just have to consent to having it moved from a side plate to on their plate. And then from there, maybe it does touch their food. Maybe this is a while later, days later. And then maybe they try just a bit of it and you just eke it in this rather than introducing something brand new, bam. And I definitely recommend if you are wanting your children to try something new, you pair it up with something you know they're going to eat. So it's not a whole meal that they've never seen before. It's comfort food next to introduction food. And you just keep introducing the introduction food over and over till it becomes more familiar, it becomes less frightening. You can use all of the tricks with getting them involved in making things. I know Will, who now at 13 is probably the best eater at the whole family. He is the one that will find the most weird and wonderful thing on a menu and try that. He's amazing. When he was small, I was genuinely concerned. Before he was diagnosed and I had an initial telephone call with the consultant, I said, I'm so glad that we've got this appointment scheduled. Thank you so much. Look, before you go, I've just got to ask you one question. He eats a really healthy diet, but it's very repetitive, as in same breakfast. It was all balanced. He had at least 7 fruit and veg a day and protein, and it was all rebalanced, but it was the same cereal with the same fruit every morning. It was the same cheese sandwiches and a different piece of fruit every lunch. And then it was the same dinner, which was a chicken and vegetable pasta that I had to make myself. It had to be the certain colour. I could never buy it anywhere else. It had to be the multicolour pasta, the 3-colour pasta, and it was all mixed together and it had melted cheese on it. The cheese had to be melted. It was to the point where if we went to a restaurant, I had to take this with me and just be like, I'm really sorry, can you please just heat this up because you won't anything else. It was the point where we left the country, we had a touring caravan and I had to take portions of this stuff in the freezer because he just would have starved otherwise. And I just remember saying to this consultant, look, what do? Do I just go, hey, do you know what? Here's your dinner, eat it. He won't starve, he'll eat if he's hungry enough. Or do I just keep feeding him what I'm feeding it? What do I do? And she said, if he's a neurotypical child, then eventually, healthy neurotypical child going to starve themselves. They would eat eventually, but a child with autism might starve themselves. So just keep doing what you're doing. And eventually we went through everything I'm talking about now, and he's amazing with everything he'll eat. But my point is, one of the things that we did to get William to try more things when he was really that extreme was to get him involved a little bit more in eating things. We got him to try pizzas because I made pizzas with him, and because he had made it himself, he was far more likely to eat it. And then eventually he did. We involved the school as well. The school were amazing, one teacher in particular. And he was trying things in school dinners and things. School dinners have actually been amazing. The children have always tried things in school dinners with their friends that they were reluctant to try at home as well. So if that is an option for you, it's definitely something worth trying and exploring. But yeah, you can get creative with presentation, get plates with their favourite characters, make things into shapes, get your children involved in doing things. But ultimately, if you can just put comfort food plus food you'd like to introduce and you move it closer and closer to them over a series of days and weeks until they're comfortable trying a bit, even if you just eat one baby carrot and that's it. That's all I expect from you, as almost like your end goal. Eventually, these things will feel second nature. And my children are all now pretty good, pretty varied eaters, thanks to this very gradual step-by-step process. So I feel it's important not to overwhelm your children's plates with food and to really get them to listen to their bodies. So we touched on this earlier, but my children have started saying to me, how much do I need to eat? Do you know what? You do need to start listening to your bodies. And bear in mind now my youngest is 8. So they've got this language, and this is obviously not what I was doing when they were smaller, but we need to listen to our bodies. Are you still hungry? Are you feeling full in a satisfied way, or moving towards very full? In which case you need to stop, perhaps a few mouthfuls ago. And the other element that we discuss, as well as listening to our bodies, is food for fuel and food for fun. Because I think labeling foods as good or bad is really a recipe for sort of not very healthy relationship with food. And food for fuel, I've explained to my children, is the stuff that gives you energy to help you run and play and do all the things you want to do, and it makes you strong and it makes you healthy, all that kind of stuff. So that would be our main food, our good for us foods. And then the food for fun would be desserts and things. So stuff that doesn't really give us positive energy to do all the really energetic things that they want to do. They like going to dancing and karate and out to play and whatever. And the food for fun doesn't really give us that really great energy that the food for fuel does. It doesn't mean it's bad food. It's food for fun. And we need the food for fuel first. And then if we've got space and we listen to our bodies and we listen to our tummies and then we feel that we'd like some food for fun, then that is what most people just call dessert. So the food for fun is potentially available there if that's something that they'd like. And I'm trying to get them to go, you need to listen to your bodies now. Do you want one of these or two of these or whatever, like a small biscuit or something? And listen to your body. What does your body tell you? My body tells me this. Also, think back to when you really did eat too much. Remember when you were lying on the sofa that time? My tummy hurt so much. We don't want to feel like that, do we? So let's listen to our bodies and stop before we get to that. And then if we can teach our children to have this really good relationship with food where they can actually listen to their bodies and not over or undereat, imagine what that would be like. That is stuff that it's a relationship with food that most people my age do not have. So that's what we're aiming for our children. So eating together, moving towards eating the same foods. One of the rules we do have at the table, though, is not discussing food at the table. Now, this is a rule that won't necessarily have to apply in every household, but I'd recommend, and here's why. If one of the children doesn't like something, they're like, ew, it's disgusting, it's going to put off the other children. And you might end up with one child that previously ate something that is going off it because one of their siblings has put them off it. If you only have an only child, or you've got one young child and much older children, this won't necessarily apply. But for my children, this is something that's very much a rule we stick to. So if you've got one child going, oh, I don't like it, it puts everyone else off. So we don't discuss food at the table. If you want to discuss food before the meal or after the meal with mummy or daddy, and fine, but at the table, we'll talk about other things. We won't talk about the actual food. But the other thing is if one child knows the other child doesn't like something, they might be like, it is so nice. I love this so much. And then the child that doesn't like it gets really upset. And that's why we ban talking about the actual food at the table, because it just causes unnecessary friction. So when everyone has finished their food for fuel and if they've had any food for fun, we do then clear up together, depending on age, how much they get involved. Just ask everyone to get down from the table, not climb. This is one thing we have to work on, not climbing across chairs while holding dishes. We just pick things up off the table when we're standing 2 feet flat on the floor. Sounds basic. We have to explain this to the children. Carry things over towards the dishwasher. The older children help load the dishwasher. And then we just spray and wipe the table. The children only eat at the table in our house. So we just have a small little handheld vacuum cleaner and just go around under the table. And that just helps to keep things clean and tidy. It ultimately helps keep the whole house clean because most of the mess is concentrated in one place, which just makes life easier. Let's face it, who doesn't need to have their life made a little bit easier? And yeah, we just all help to lay the table together and help to clean up together. And that just comes very naturally to them. And they're asked to do that from a young age, even though, honestly, when they're at a young age, they're not asked to do much at all. But when they're involved in that from a young age, it's not this, oh, you're a teenager now, I want you to do something. And then it's like, absolutely up in arms, you've been asked to do anything, as teenagers can sometimes be. So the younger you can get your children involved in just the basics of laying the table, clearing up, then it's going to be less of a shock when they're a little bit older and you'd like them to get involved. And it's going to be less of a shock when they go to university and have to do these things for themselves, because you're ultimately teaching them life skills. And all of that can be encompassed in your evening mealtime routine. Now, shortly after evening mealtime routine comes the evening bedtime routine. Now, bedtime routine, I think, is something that you think about a lot when your children are very small babies, but actually is equally and sometimes if not more important as they get older, as a key part of their routine, because if you don't get the bedtime routine right, then lack of sleep, you end up with cranky children and really stressed out parents that haven't had enough sleep, but just absolutely at the end of their tether and totally exacerbated. So if you want to learn all about bedtime routine or recommendations, click on the video on screen now. Check out my Organised Life Club, hang out with parents of neurodiverse families and get routine resources inside of there. And I shall see you in the next episode. Bye.